The twin suns of Vecra 7 hammered down like molten fists, turning the crystalline sand into a shimmering sea of torture. Kira's boots left deep impressions in the superheated dunes as she stumbled forward, each step a monumental effort that sent tremors through her parched frame. The ornate leather wrappings that marked her as an Ashari hunter hung loose on her diminished form. No longer the proud armor of a tribal warrior, but mere rags clinging to a dying woman. Her throat felt like crushed glass. The last precious drops of water had vanished 3 nights ago when the Skarath raiders struck their camp under cover of darkness. She could still hear the screams, still see the flames consuming the hide tents, still feel the weight of failure crushing her chest. As lead hunter, she should have sensed the attack coming. Instead, she'd awakened to chaos and death, barely escaping with her blade and the clothes on her back. The ceremonial scars along her arms, once symbols of honor and endurance, now seemed to mock her weakness. Each raised line told a story of trials overcome, of pain conquered through sheer will. But no trial had prepared her for this, the slow dissolution of hope beneath a merciless sky. Kira's hand instinctively moved to the curved hunting knife at her hip, its bone handle worn smooth by generations of Ashari warriors. The weapon had belonged to her grandmother, then her mother, and finally passed to her when she'd proven herself worthy through combat and cunning. Now it might be all she had left to trade for water, if she could find anyone desperate or foolish enough to barter with a dying nomad. The wind shifted, carrying with it an alien scent that made her nostrils flare. Smoke, not the acrid stench of burning hide and flesh that had haunted her dreams, but something cleaner. Mechanical. Her eyes, bloodshot from sand and exhaustion, scanned the wavering horizon until she spotted it, a thin column of gray smoke rising from behind a cluster of rust-colored rocks. Hope and desperation warred in her chest as she changed course toward the smoke. Every rational thought screamed warnings. It could be more raiders or scavengers or worse. The wastelands bred predators of every kind, and a lone woman would make easy prey. But rationality was a luxury she could no longer afford. Water was life, and life was worth any risk. As she crested the rocky outcropping, Kira's breath caught in her throat. Below lay the twisted wreckage of a spacecraft, its hull split open like a cracked egg. But this wasn't one of the ramshackle vessels the Skarath flew. This craft bore the clean lines and advanced materials of off-world technology. Human technology. Her fingers tightened around her knife's handle. Humans were traders, merchants, sometimes even allies. But they were also pragmatists who rarely gave anything without expecting payment in return. Still, they possessed water, purification technology that could turn even the foulest desert seepage into life-giving liquid. A figure emerged from behind the wreckage. Tall, bipedal, unmistakably human in its movements. Even at this distance, she could see he was armed, but not in an aggressive stance. He seemed to be tending to some kind of equipment, perhaps trying to repair his ship's systems. Kira took a shuddering breath, tasting dust and defeat on her tongue. This was it. Her last gamble. She would approach with her blade visible but not drawn, show strength without immediately threatening violence. Perhaps she could trade her services as a guide or information about safe water sources, or her mind shied away from the other possibilities. She was Ashari, a daughter of the desert winds, a hunter who had tracked ghost cats through crystal canyons and brought down sandworms with nothing but cunning and steel. But pride was another luxury the dying could not afford. Step by agonizing step, she began her descent toward the crashed ship and the human who might hold her salvation in his hands. Dane Mitchell looked up from his jury-rigged water filtration system as movement caught his eye. A figure was descending the rocky slope, humanoid but clearly not human. The being's gait spoke of exhaustion, yet there was something predatory in the way she moved, like a wounded cat still capable of striking. As she drew closer, Dane could make out more details. Definitely female, with the lean, muscular build of someone accustomed to physical hardship. Her skin had a subtle golden hue that seemed to shimmer in the harsh sunlight, and intricate scars decorated her arms in patterns too deliberate to be accidental. Most telling was the way her hand rested near the curved blade at her hip, ready but not yet threatening. "That's close enough," he called out in standard trade language. his voice carrying easily across the desert air. The universal tongue was crude but functional, developed for exactly these kinds of interspecies encounters. The alien woman stopped, swaying slightly on her feet. When she spoke, her voice was like wind across broken stone. "Water," she said, the single word carrying the weight of desperate need. Trade." Dane's experienced eye took in her condition, the sunken cheeks, the way she favored her left leg, the slight tremor in her hands. He'd seen dehydration before during his years running supply routes through hostile territory. She had maybe hours left, possibly less. "What do you have to trade?" he asked, though he was already reaching for his emergency water flask. Her golden eyes flickered with something between hope and resignation. Her free hand moved to the ornate knife, then stopped. "Blade, old, sharp, or..." She straightened with visible effort, chin lifting in a gesture of grim determination. "Body, still strong." The casual way she offered herself hit Dane like a physical blow. In her world, apparently survival trumped everything else. But the defeat in her voice, the way she held herself as if preparing for one final humiliation, made something twist in his chest. "Here," he said simply, tossing her the flask. "Drink." She caught it reflexively, then stared at the container as if it might be a mirage. "Price?" "No price. Just drink." For a long moment she didn't move. Her eyes darted between his face and the flask, searching for the trap, the hidden cost. When none came, her composure finally cracked. She fumbled with the cap, hands shaking, so badly she nearly dropped it. The first sip was tentative, as if she feared the water might be poisoned. Then desperation took over, and she drank deeply, water running down her chin and neck. Dane watched her throat work, noting how she forced herself to stop before emptying the flask entirely. The discipline of someone who knew water's true value. "Thank you," she gasped, offering the flask back. "Keep it. I've got more." Dane gestured toward his makeshift camp. "And shade if you want it." Again that searching look. "Why help? You not know me?" Dane considered the question. In his 32 years, he'd learned that the universe was mostly indifferent to suffering. But that didn't mean people had to be. "Because you needed help," he said finally. "That's reason enough." She followed him to the shelter he'd rigged from salvaged hull plating and thermal blankets. In the blessed coolness of the shade, she seemed to deflate exhaustion, claiming what adrenaline had sustained. "I am Kira," she said formally, placing her hand over her heart in what was clearly a ritual greeting. "Ashari, hunter of the Windclaw tribe. Dane Mitchell, cargo pilot, formerly of the merchant vessel Starfall." He settled across from her, noting how she positioned herself to keep both the exit and her blade within easy reach. "What happened? To your tribe?" Her face darkened. "Skarath raiders. Came at night 3 days past. Killed many. Scattered rest." Her fingers traced one of the scars on her arm. "I failed them. Was supposed to guard. To watch." "One person can't watch everywhere," Dane said gently. "Sounds like you did what you could." "Not enough." The words carried bitter self-recrimination. "Never enough." They sat in companionable silence for a while, sharing the precious coolness of the shade. Dane found himself studying her face, the sharp cheekbones, the way her golden eyes reflected, light like gems, the proud set of her shoulders even in defeat. She was beautiful in an alien way, but it was her obvious strength that impressed him most. Even dying of thirst, she'd maintained her dignity. "Your ship," Kira said eventually, nodding toward the wreckage. "Can repair?" "Working on it. Communication. Array took the worst damage, but the power core's intact. Give me a few more days, maybe a week, and I should be able to send a distress signal." "Few days," she repeated thoughtfully. "If you willing, I know desert. Can help find food, safe places to shelter." "I'd appreciate that," Dane said, meaning it. "But right now you need rest. And more water." As if summoned by his words, she swayed again, exhaustion finally overwhelming her iron will. Without thinking, Dane moved closer, steadying her with a gentle hand on her shoulder. She tensed at the contact but didn't pull away. "Sleep," he said softly. "I'll keep watch." Her golden eyes studied his face one more time, and whatever she saw there seemed to satisfy her. For the first time since meeting him, Kira allowed herself to relax, settling back against the salvaged hull plating. As she drifted toward sleep, Dane found himself marveling at the strange turns life could take. Yesterday he'd been alone on a hostile world, focused solely on his own survival. Now he had a companion, a fierce, proud warrior who'd offered everything she had in exchange for water he'd given freely. Perhaps they could keep each other alive long enough for rescue to arrive. The third dawn since their meeting painted the desert in shades of amber and rose. Kira woke to the smell of something she hadn't encountered in days: cooked food. Her stomach clenched with desperate hunger as she sat up, immediately alert despite her exhaustion. Dane crouched beside a small heating unit, stirring something in a metal cup. "Morning," he said without looking up. "Protein paste and water. Not exactly gourmet, but it'll keep you going." She accepted the offered meal with both hands, a gesture of respect among her people. The paste was bland and had an odd texture, but it was sustenance. As she ate, she watched Dane work on a complex array of salvaged electronics spread across a makeshift table. "Communication equipment?" she asked, trying to jury-rig a transmitter from whatever survived the crash. He held up a twisted piece of metal. "Your people ever deal with electronics?" Kira shook her head. "We follow old ways. Stars for navigation, wind for weather, instinct for danger." She paused, studying his concentrated expression. "But I learn quick." Over the following hours, she proved that claim. While Dane worked on the more delicate electronic components, Kira demonstrated her desert expertise. She showed him how to read the subtle signs in sand patterns that indicated underground water, how to identify the few edible plants that survived in this wasteland, and most importantly, how to recognize the approach of the vicious sandstorms that could strip flesh from bone. "See how horizon shimmers differently here?" She pointed northeast, where the air seemed to dance with unusual intensity. "Storm comes, maybe 6 hours." Dane squinted at the distant disturbance. To his eyes, it looked no different from the heat mirages that constantly played across the landscape. "How can you tell?" "Light bends wrong, and smell." She tilted her head, nostrils flaring slightly. "Metal taste in air, storm brings electric charge." Her prediction proved accurate. By midday, a wall of swirling sand approached their position, like a living thing. Dane watched in fascination and growing alarm as Kira efficiently secured their camp, her movements economical and purposeful. "Inside," she commanded, herding him into the shelter they'd reinforced with additional hull plating. "Stay low, breathe shallow, sand gets in everything." The storm hit with supernatural fury. Wind howled like a tortured beast, and sand found its way through the tiniest gaps in their shelter. In the cramped space, Dane became acutely aware of Kira's presence beside him, the warmth of her body, the steady rhythm of her breathing, the subtle scent of desert spices that seemed to cling to her skin. "How long do these last?" he asked, raising his voice over the storm's roar. "Hours, sometimes days." Her shoulder pressed against his as another gust threatened to tear away their shelter. "We wait." In the enforced intimacy of their confined space, conversation came easier. Kira spoke of her childhood among the Windclaw tribe, of learning to hunt in the crystal canyons where predators lurked in every shadow. Dane shared stories of worlds beyond Vecra 7, of space stations where water flowed freely from taps and green plants grew in endless profusion. "Sounds like paradise," Kira murmured, her golden eyes reflecting the dim light from Dane's emergency lamp. "It can be, but paradise gets boring after a while. That's why I took cargo runs to places like this." "You choose danger?" "I choose purpose, I guess. Out here, every decision matters. Every day survived is an achievement." Kira considered this. "At home, we say, only through hardship do we discover our true strength. But your people seem strong without suffering." Some are. Others never get the chance to find out. Dane shifted position, accidentally brushing against her arm. The contact sent an unexpected jolt through him. Maybe that's why we seek out challenges. Or maybe, Kira said softly, some people are meant to find each other in difficult places. The words hung between them, loaded with possibility. In the storm's fury, with sand scouring the world outside, they'd found an island of calm. Dane found himself studying the elegant curve of her neck, the way her lips moved when she spoke, the intelligence that sparked in her alien eyes. Kira, he began, not sure what he intended to say. She turned toward him, and suddenly the space between them seemed charged with more than the storm's electricity. Her hand found his in the darkness, fingers intertwining with surprising gentleness, for someone so obviously dangerous. In my culture, she whispered, warriors who share survival share bond. Sacred trust. What kind of bond? His voice came out rougher than intended. Instead of answering with words, she leaned closer, her breath warm against his cheek. The kiss, when it came, was tentative at first, a question rather than a demand. But when Dane responded, deepening, the contact, she met his passion with her own fierce intensity. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Kira's eyes searched his face in the lamp's dim glow, looking for judgment or regret. She found neither. The storm's getting worse, Dane observed, though his attention was entirely focused on the woman beside him. Yes, she agreed, her hand still clasped in his. But we are safe here. Outside, the wind howled its fury at the world. Inside their small shelter, two souls from different worlds discovered that some barriers were meant to be crossed, and some bridges were worth building regardless of the storms that might come. The electronic equipment could wait. Some connections were more important than the ones made of wire and circuitry. The storm raged for 2 days, trapping them in their makeshift shelter as the desert unleashed its full fury. What began as desperate proximity evolved into something neither had expected, a connection that transcended the boundaries of species and culture. On the second morning, as sand continued to whisper against their shelter walls, Kira woke to find herself curled against Dane's side, his arm protective around her shoulders. For the first time in years, she felt truly safe. The realization was both comforting and terrifying. The wind is dying, she murmured against his chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. His hand stroked through her dark hair, careful of the small braids that marked her hunter status. Are you always right about the weather? Usually. She tilted her head to look at him, struck again by the kindness in his blue eyes. Among her people, eyes were often hard, calculating survival in every glance. Dane's held warmth she'd almost forgotten existed. But sometimes I hope to be wrong. Why this time? Her fingers traced the edge of his shirt, marveling at the softness of the fabric. Because when storm ends, we must return to work, to preparing for rescue, and then... She couldn't finish the thought. And then I leave, he completed gently. The words hung heavy between them, in the cocoon of their shelter, with the storm providing a barrier against the outside world. It had been easy to forget that this was temporary, that he belonged to the stars while she belonged to the desert. Tell me about your tribe, Dane said, shifting the conversation to safer ground. Before the attack, Kira was quiet for a long moment, her expression growing distant. We were strong, proud. The Windclaw controlled 3 oases and the trade routes between them. I was third hunter, responsible for protecting the herds and the young ones. Her voice caught slightly. I had a sister, Naya. She was to be bonded this season. What happened to her? I don't know. The admission came out as barely a whisper. When the Skurath attacked, everything became chaos. Fire everywhere, people screaming, running in all directions. I tried to reach the children's tent, but... She shuddered, the memory still raw. A raider's blade caught me here. She indicated a barely healed wound along her ribs. By the time I could fight again, it was too late. Everyone was gone. Dane's arms tightened around her, You survived. That means others might have too. Perhaps. But even if they did, I failed them. A hunter's first duty is to protect the tribe. I was supposed to sense danger, to give warning. Instead, I slept while death crept through our camp. One person can't be everywhere at once. You don't understand. Kira pulled back to meet his eyes, her own burning with self-recrimination. Among the Ashari, failure in duty brings exile. Even if I found survivors, they would not welcome me back. I am, what is your word? Outcast. The pain in her voice made Dane's chest ache. He could see how deeply the guilt had wounded her, how it ate at her from the inside like acid. Their loss, he said firmly. Any tribe that would abandon someone like you doesn't deserve your loyalty. Someone like me? There was bitter amusement in her tone. You mean a failure? A broken hunter whose pride cost her people everything? I mean someone brave enough to approach a stranger when she was dying of thirst. Someone who shared her knowledge freely, who's kept us both alive through this storm. Someone who... He cupped her face gently, thumb brushing across her cheek. Someone who's more honorable than any code that would condemn her for surviving. Tears she'd been holding back for days finally spilled over. In her culture, tears were a luxury the desert couldn't afford, a sign of weakness that could get you killed. But here, in Dane's arms, she allowed herself this moment of grief. I miss them, she whispered. Even knowing they might reject me, I miss them. Of course you do. They were your family. As her tears subsided, Kira became aware of how vulnerable she'd allowed herself to become. No Ashari warrior would show such emotion to an outsider, yet somehow with Dane it felt right. Safe. Your people, she said, wiping her eyes. They don't exile their own for failure. Sometimes, but we've also learned that forgiveness can be stronger than judgment, that people who failed once often try harder not to fail again. She considered this radical concept. And if your tribe, your people, if they saw you with me, an alien, what would they say? Dane was quiet for a moment, his fingers still, stroking her hair. Some would disapprove. Others wouldn't care. A few might even celebrate it. Humanity isn't as unified as your tribe was. Was that frightening? Not having one path, one code to follow? Sometimes. But it also means more choices, more chances to find where you really belong. The implications of his words settled between them like a promise. Outside, the storm was indeed dying, the wind's howl fading to whispers. Soon they would have to emerge, return to the work of survival and rescue. But something had changed in their small shelter during the storm's fury. Kira shifted in his arms, her hand splaying across his chest. Dane, yeah? Show me what choice feels like. This time, when their lips met, there was no hesitation. The kiss deepened into something that spoke of need, of connection, of two wounded souls finding solace in each other. His hands explored the golden warmth of her skin, while hers marveled at the differences and similarities between their bodies. In the fading fury of the storm, they discovered that some boundaries existed only in the mind, and some healing required the touch of another's soul. When they finally broke apart, both breathless and changed, the storm outside had stilled completely. But neither was in any hurry to leave their shelter. Some discoveries were too precious to rush, and some connections too fragile to expose to the harsh light of reality just yet. The desert could wait. For now, they had each other, and that was enough. The rescue ship arrived on the 7th day, its sleek hull a stark contrast to the endless expanse of crystalline sand. Kira watched from the rocky outcropping as the vessel settled onto the makeshift landing pad she and Dane had constructed from salvaged hull plating and emergency flares. UES Meridian, Dane read from the ship's markings, lowering his makeshift telescope. Search and rescue, they found us. Relief should have flooded through her. Instead, Kira felt her stomach clench with an emotion she was still learning to name. Dread. Rescue meant safety, supplies, medical attention. It also meant the end of this strange interlude where she'd discovered parts of herself she'd never known existed. You will go with them, she said, not quite making it a question. Dane's hand found hers, fingers intertwining with the easy familiarity they'd developed over the past week. That was the plan. And I will. She gestured vaguely at the desert. Around them. Return to the wasteland. Search for my people, or find another tribe willing to accept an exile. Is that what you want? The question hung between them like a challenge. 7 days ago, Kira would have answered without hesitation. The desert was her home, her people her only possible future. But 7 days ago, she hadn't known that kindness could exist without expectation of reward, that strength could be found in vulnerability, that connection could transcend the boundaries of species and culture. I don't know anymore, she admitted. The rescue ship's hatch opened with a pneumatic hiss, and 3 figures in environmental suits emerged. Their leader, a woman with commander's stripes, approached with the confident stride of someone accustomed to taking charge of chaotic situations. Captain Mitchell? Her voice was crisp through her suit's external speakers. Commander Sarah Chen, UES Meridian. Are you injured? Bruised and dehydrated but functional, Dane replied, helping Kira to her feet. This is Kira of the Ashari. She's the reason I'm still alive. Commander Chen's helmet turned toward Kira, and even through the polarized visor, her surprise was evident. A local native? Our scans didn't show any settlements in this region. Nomadic, Kira explained, falling back on the simple trade language they'd used for initial contact. Tribes scattered. I alone now. I see. The commander's tone suggested she'd encountered similar situations before. Well, we can certainly provide medical attention and basic supplies before we leave. Actually, Dane interjected, I'd like to request passenger berth for Kira. She has no safe haven here, and she's proven herself invaluable as a desert survival specialist. Kira's heart hammered against her ribs. He was offering her a way out, a chance to leave the harsh world that had taken everything from her, but the offer also terrified her in ways she couldn't fully articulate. Commander Chen considered this. We're not technically equipped for refugee transport, but given the circumstances, I suppose we could arrange something. Miss Kira, are you interested in traveling off-world? The question every explorer dreamed of hearing, and Kira found herself paralyzed. Leave Vecra 7? Leave behind everything she'd ever known for the promise of something better? She began, then stopped. In trade language, she lacked the words to express her complex emotions. In her own tongue, she whispered to Dane, What if I don't belong out there? What if your people see me as primitive, dangerous? Dane's response came in her language, his pronunciation still clumsy but improving. Then we'll find people who see you as I do, strong, intelligent, beautiful, someone worth knowing. The linguistic adaptation is impressive, Commander Chen observed. How long have you two been working together? Long enough, Dane said simply. While the rescue team loaded salvageable equipment from the crashed ship, Kira found herself standing at the edge of their makeshift camp, staring out at the desert that had shaped her entire existence. The wind carried familiar scents, heated sand, the distant promise of moisture, the metallic tang of approaching weather. This wasteland had tried to kill her, had taken her family and her tribe, had stripped away everything she thought she was. But it had also led her to Dane. Regrets? His voice was soft as he joined her at the camp's perimeter. Questions, she corrected. Among my people we have a saying. The hunter who chases two prey catches neither. If I come with you, I abandon any hope of finding survivors from my tribe. I turn my back on everything I've ever been. And if you stay? She was quiet for a long moment, watching heat shimmer across the distant dunes. If I stay, I survive. Maybe find another tribe. Maybe live as an exile. Maybe die alone in the sand. Those aren't your only choices, you know. Kira turned to look at him, eyebrows raised. Come with me, Dane said, his voice carrying a certainty that surprised them both. Not as a refugee or an exile, but as my partner. Help me establish the water purification station I've been dreaming about building. We could set it up here. On Vecra 7, serve both human shipping routes and local tribes. Give people like your Ashari access to clean water without having to trade away their dignity. The audacity of the proposal took her breath away. You would do this? Give up your career among the stars to build something here? I've been thinking about it since the storm, he admitted. Flying cargo runs between established ports was getting old anyway. But this could matter. We could make a real difference. We? If you'll have me. I know the technology. You know the culture and the terrain. Together we could build something that would outlast both of us. Kira stared at him, seeing not just the man who'd saved her life with a freely given flask of water, but a partner who understood that some bridges were worth building regardless of the storms that might come. The first water station, she said, slowly, should be placed between the old Windclaw territory and the Skarath lands, neutral ground where refugees from both sides could find sanctuary. Dane's smile was radiant. Is that a yes? Instead of answering with words, Kira kissed him, pouring 7 days of gratitude, affection, and newborn hope into the contact. When they broke apart, both were grinning. Commander Chen's not going to know what to make of this, Dane observed. Let her wonder, Kira replied, her confidence returning in full force. We have work to do. As they walked back toward the rescue ship hand in hand, Kira realized that sometimes the greatest strength came not from enduring hardship alone, but from choosing to build something better with someone who saw the world through different eyes. The desert would always be part of her, but it no longer had to define her limits. Some horizons were meant to be crossed, and some futures were worth the risk of leaving the past behind. Together, they would turn mercy into something lasting, and in doing so, discover that the strongest bonds were forged not in desperation, but in the conscious choice to create hope where none had existed before.